Sometimes in geopolitics, the irony is so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. This week, that irony came wrapped in a shiny official document from the United States, their annual human rights report. And let me tell you, they had quite a lot to say about India. But before we get into the part where I show you the mirror of American hypocrisy, let's first talk about what exactly they've accused us of. According to this report, the US has flagged India over how the government treats minorities. They talk about what they call rising hate speeches. They point at the Citizenship Amendment Act, which the United Nations has labeled fundamentally discriminatory. They highlight anti-conversion laws that they say challenge freedom of belief. They bring up the 2019 removal of Article 370, which gave special status to Jammu and Kashmir, a Muslim-majority region. And they even mention the demolition of properties owned by Muslims. So, in their eyes, this is the picture of India that makes it to a big global report. That's the official context we're working with here. Now I know what you're probably thinking. अरे ये तो वही पुरानी कहानी है. The same talking points we've seen again and again in Western media. But here's where it gets interesting. Because after painting this picture of India as some sort of serial offender in the Human Rights Department, the same report casually mentions Pakistan and says Pakistan rarely acts against rights abuses. Rarely acts? Excuse me? This is the same Pakistan where journalists disappear for writing one wrong word, where minorities are practically living in fear every single day, where blasphemy laws are used like personal revenge weapons, and where women's rights are about as respected as traffic rules in Delhi during rush hour. And here's where the bias becomes almost cartoonly obvious: the language. Words matter in diplomacy. If you say systemic abuse versus rarely acts, it changes the whole perception. Strong words for India, soft words for Pakistan. Imagine two students in class. One gets called a habitual troublemaker. The other gets told they sometimes forget homework. The impression created is worlds apart, even if the second one is actually causing more chaos. This is where I get angry. Not because criticism of India is completely off limits, but because of the glaring, blinding double standards. When it comes to India, every single incident is amplified, documented, and given moral lectures. But when it's about Pakistan, it's wrapped up in soft words like rarely acts, as if they just forgot to water their plants, instead of running an entire state machinery that's been crushing dissent for decades. And by the way, anyone who has tracked Pakistan's internal politics knows that forced disappearances, targeted killings, and blasphemy-related violence aren't rare. They are frequent. Yet somehow, that doesn't merit the same high-volume outrage. And this is where I have to remind you, the United States is not some neutral referee of human rights. They are a player, a big one, and they have a long history of using human rights as a convenient stick to hit countries they want to pressure, while politely ignoring the same, or worse, in their friend's backyard. You want examples? Let's not even leave South Asia. Think about Saudi Arabia, one of America's closest allies. This is a country where women only recently got the right to drive, where political dissent can get you a one-way ticket to prison, or worse, and where public beheadings are still a thing. Do you see the same aggressive tone in US reports about them? Of course not. In fact, let's zoom out a bit. Over the years, the US has released reports and statements on countries like Egypt, Israel, and even Turkey. But somehow, the criticism always comes with a diplomatic cushion when these nations are seen as strategic allies. Take Egypt, for example. The regime there has been accused of mass arrests, torture, and press crackdowns. Yet Washington still sends billions in military aid every year. Why? Because Egypt plays a key role in the Middle East security puzzle, especially for US interests. And don't forget Israel. Despite multiple UN resolutions flagging issues in Palestinian territories, US official language remains careful, often reframing problems as security concerns rather than human rights violations. Now, here's where I want you to pause and think. Why would the US go so hard on India right now? Especially when India is not just a growing economy, but also a critical partner in countering China's rise in the Indo-Pacific. Is it purely about human rights? Or is there also a little bit of we need to keep India in check happening behind the scenes? I'm not asking you to blindly agree with me, but think about the timing. This report comes at a time when India has been making bold foreign policy moves, refusing to take sides in the Russia-Ukraine war, buying oil from where it gets the best deal, openly saying we will do what's in our national interest and not what Washington dictates. You think that sits well with the US foreign policy establishment? And before anyone jumps in with, but criticism is necessary in a democracy, let me make this clear. Yes, it is. We Indians can and should debate our own laws, our own policies, our own mistakes. That's how democracies get better. But there's a difference between self-reflection and being lectured by a country whose own human rights record is, let's just say, not exactly spotless. This is the same US that had the world watching in horror when George Floyd was killed, that has an ongoing crisis of mass incarceration, disproportionately targeting minorities, and where gun violence claims more lives in a year than many conflicts do in other parts of the world. Yet somehow, they still position themselves as the global HR department. And it doesn't stop there. If you look at America's own southern border policies, you'll see reports of children being separated from parents, migrants being detained in poor conditions, and refugees being turned away. Where's the moral high ground in that? And yet, year after year, the US continues to put itself in the role of judge, jury, and moral teacher to the rest of the planet. And let's not forget the Native American story. Entire communities still facing systemic poverty, poor access to healthcare, education, and justice. If human rights truly start at home, America still has a lot of homework left to do. It's almost comical when you think about it. Imagine your neighbor has a leaking roof, broken windows, and rats in the kitchen, but still comes over to your house to give you a lecture on how you should clean your garden. That's what this feels like. And that's why I say, it's not about rejecting all criticism from abroad. It's about recognizing when it's being used as a tool for influence, rather than as a genuine concern. Now, let's also not miss the fact that this India versus Pakistan framing in the report is dangerous. Because in international perception, these comparisons stick. When the US report paints India in sharp, critical tones and uses soft language for Pakistan, it sends a subtle message to policymakers, media, and the public abroad that both are flawed, but maybe Pakistan is just a little less so right now. That is absurd. It's like comparing a traffic fine for jaywalking with an actual bank robbery and saying both are crimes, but hey, the robber rarely does it. Here's my hot take. I think this selective outrage is part of a bigger pattern. You see it not just in US reports, but also in the way Western media covers India. Every internal debate here, be it CAA, Kashmir, farmers' protests, or religious tensions, is quickly framed in ways that fit their pre-decided narrative. And this is where I feel Indian audiences need to be sharper. When you read a foreign report about India, don't just ask, is this true? Also ask, why are they telling me this now? What are they not telling me alongside this? That second question often reveals more than the report itself. And honestly, if human rights are truly universal and not a political tool, the standard should be the same for everyone. If you're going to lecture India for alleged minority mistreatment, then go all in on Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, China, and even the US itself. But that never happens. Which is why these reports end up sounding less like moral guidance and more like selective press releases tailored for foreign policy goals. Let me also connect this to something recent. You remember how the US reacted when India signed major trade and defense deals with Russia, even after the Ukraine war started? There was a lot of back-channel pressure, a lot of friendly advice, and a lot of sudden concern over Indian democracy. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe it's just a reminder that in geopolitics, there's no such thing as a completely innocent moral stance. There's always a strategic angle. And it's not like this is the first time. In the Cold War era, the US was happy to work with dictators in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, as long as they were anti-Soviet. Human rights only became a talking point when a leader stepped out of line. The same playbook still runs today, only with different villains and different buzzwords. And I know some people watching might be thinking, but come on, aren't we also guilty of sometimes playing down our own issues? Sure we are. Every country has its blind spots. But here's the difference. We don't go around the world pretending to be the ultimate judge of others, while sweeping our own mess under the carpet. That's where the credibility gap comes in. And once you see that gap, you can't unsee it. So where does this leave us? First, we need to take any foreign criticism with both openness and skepticism. If there's truth in it, fix it. If there's bias in it, expose it. And second, we need to be very clear that human rights reports from powerful countries are never just about human rights. They're also about influence, leverage, and soft power. That's the real game. And here's the thing, India's rise on the global stage will only invite more of these reports, op-eds, and think tank studies. The more independent we are in our decision making, the more we will see this kind of selective scrutiny. It's part of the price you pay for being a country that doesn't simply fall in line. And as citizens, we need to learn to read between the lines, not just what's written, but why it's written and for whom. Now I'll leave you with a thought. If tomorrow India were to align 100% with US foreign policy, vote exactly as they want in the UN, buy only from their allies, and stop independent decision making, do you think these human rights reports would suddenly become a lot kinder? My bet is yes, and that tells you everything you need to know about how these things work. If you found this breakdown useful, hit the like button so more people see it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know if you think the US is being fair here or just playing politics. Subscribe for more content that cuts through the noise and share this with friends who always ask, यार ये foreign reports का असली मतलब क्या होता है? Because now you have the answer.